Measuring coaching impact. And when I say we, I mean Rebecca Hornakis and you all will. Cynthia Curry, as I said, is also here to talk about Incademy, your new accessibility resource. And that'll come after the Research Minute question of the month. So Research Minute and question of the month. So I'm going to quickly give this to you because I know it's a lot of language that I pulled from the abstract. But in Kentucky, there's a Math Achievement Fund, and it's unique. It's a state level program. So it has targeted interventions, peer coaching, and close collaboration among teachers. And it's about improving math achievement grades K through 3. The program has been found to improve math achievement and reading test scores, even though it's focused on math, and non-test outcomes, including student attendance and disciplinary incidents. So this is true for kids from various socioeconomic backgrounds, slightly higher for racial minorities. So the reason this really grabbed my attention is one, Kentucky has the SPDIG, right? Kentucky has also been a CSEP state focused on middle school math. This is about K3 specifically. But the thing that caught my eye, targeted interventions, peer coaching, right? You don't see a lot of studies where peer coaching is part of it. And then the close collaboration, because we talk about how collaboration among personnel is really important for professional learning, professional development. Again, the more studies we have that describe what it looks like and the fact that it's an impact on child outcomes, the better off we are. So here are some highlights. So they used a response to intervention approach, right? Which typically folks use as somewhat interchangeable with MTSS, right? So it had a universal screener, tiered interventions with increasing intensity, regular progress monitoring. Probably how all of you think about your MTSS, if that's what you're supporting. It requires professional development for the intervention teacher and the classroom teachers. So if you had gone to our Fidelity Friday when Wei Ying Chow from IES spoke, she talked about that kind of support for these two programs that have had a big impact. I also want to show that or highlight the fact that the spillover effects on reading achievement and what that standard deviation look like, since I just brought it up. But also something I hadn't brought up yet is disciplinary incidents and absences were reduced significantly. So, there are times we think, MTSS, it takes so long to have an impact. It's really nice to see a study that shows that it works. And especially I liked that peer coaching collaboration and the fact that they zeroed in on professional development. And it only cost 4-year per pupil cost is $750 in 2018, $2019 for a 0.09 standard deviation. So I felt like this was a bit of good news. All right, second research article. Can an evaluation system improve the practice of novice teachers? Evidence from Tennessee. So they had 650,000 classroom observations conducted in 2012 to 2013. And that was all the way, it started in 2012, 2013 school year, went through 2018 to 2019. And so they have a rubric that they use. And the AOR, I forgot to jot that down. It's basically like the one thing you should really focus on. Like you could really improve in this area and it would be pretty important. And so they looked at novice teachers and what that specific thing is that they needed to improve on. So they were more likely, the novice teachers, to receive the AOR, the focus area of classroom management and presentation of instructional content. And I know Rebecca's probably nodding her head in the background because of the Otis, which looks at instructional strategies and how important that is. So these basic teaching skills that everyone needs to have to be successful in the classroom. Veteran teachers were more likely to have these focus areas related to higher order aspects of the job, such as how to teach problem solving skills to students. The lowest performing novice teachers were more likely to receive those classroom management instructional strategies than their high performing peers. High performing novices, veterans were very similar across their scores. But one of the findings here, and I don't know if I jotted it down or not, was teachers did get better over time. They showed that. So time in the classroom did matter, that folks starting to look at things more like the problem solving things beyond just that classroom management instructional strategies. So the question for you is, what does this mean, the study's findings, for pre-service and in-service supports? If we know that novice teachers need the classroom management, need instructional strategies, generally, unless they're showing that they're already a little bit more like veteran teachers than most novices. So what does that mean for your pre-service and in-service supports? Rebecca, I might call on you because I can.
Hi, Jennifer. It's
Yeah.
Selena
Hi,
from
Selena.
I was just going to say in particular for pre-service that they need to have more than one classroom management class. Um, and so really looking at that over the course of their, pre-service time. And yeah, that's
Yep.
what came to my mind
Yep.
immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me crazy that we have so many years of surveys from teachers saying, I don't know how to manage a class. Or like, why? Why haven't that's it? To me, that's a technical issue, not an adaptive challenge. And why haven't we solved that? So thank you for saying that, Selena. One of the things that this brought to mind, instructional strategies, classroom management, yes, let's do better. In addition to that is figuring out who needs what, right? Like the professional development, not one size fits all. I don't know that the teachers would have been able to say, though, well, I'm okay with all this, but what I really need is this. Maybe they could, maybe they couldn't. It wasn't part of the study. But how would you figure out how to differentiate your professional development? That was the other thing I was thinking about. Thanks for thinking alongside me. So here's a question that someone brought up, one of the grantees brought up, and if you could just go ahead and add to the chat if you have thoughts. But the question is, what helps you with project management? Some people have books that they really have liked about how to manage projects or do project management, it's usually called that. Some people have taken a course, some people have some kind of certification. So if you could add to the chat, this is just that, helping each other think about project management, because we don't usually do anything with that in SIG network. Maybe if we found something really good, we could provide that. Thanks, everyone. All right. MTSS Community of Practice is going to be next Thursday. I'll be facilitating, but Kristen Brown I'm probably not going to be feeling great that day. So Kristen Brown says she doesn't mind kind of taking the lead. She's going to be sharing, or someone from her team, Colorado MTSS resources. Alexa Hudak said she wouldn't mind sharing some Oklahoma resources, but we're open to everyone's resources. There's just so much good stuff that's available that might be useful for folks. It's going to be focused on that. Native American Working Group is meeting February 19th if you'd like to join us. Fidelity Friday will be February 21st. Jennifer Pierce is going to be talking about measuring MTSS fidelity, and specifically this is integrated MTSS. And she's going to talk about how they chose the different features they focus on, how that's been, and now that they've actually been doing it for a little while, what they've learned. Hopefully that'll be helpful to you. We have mentors for you if you're new or new-ish, or just feel like you want a mentor. I will pair you, just email me. The book club is still leading, talking about Dare to Lead. If you just want to read that book on your own, I think it's a great book. And then if you have anything for the newsletter, any successes, or you just found an interesting article you think others would benefit from, go ahead and email me that as well. This assessing ELA curriculum shifts, I had talked about this guide. It's really a great guide thinking about how you support effective use of curriculum, right? High quality instructional materials, curriculum. How do you ensure it's being used correctly? So I'm going to, as soon as I get done with this, I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat so you can sign up if you are interested. It's at the exact same time as the MTSS Community of Practice. But you can choose one. Next, Cynthia Curry is going to share her 2 truths and a dream, and then tell us about one of our newest centers. We're really excited about it, Incademy, National Center on Accessible Digital Educational Materials and Instruction. They are getting into a space where there's a lot of vendors popping up who promise you the world of accessibility. And Cynthia and her team actually know what's what, and they're there to share it with you free, no charge. So Cynthia, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks so much for the invitation to present to this BIDIG group. I think I have, let's see if I can grab, here we go. So I'm just dropped a link in the chat to the slide deck that I'll be sharing. So while you go grab that and confirm that that link is working, I will share my 2 truths and a dream, which would be, my background is as a general education science teacher. So I actually worked, my undergraduate degree was in engineering, and I worked as an engineer for several years before realizing that I really wanted to be a teacher. My husband was a science teacher at the time and was having way more fun than I was. So I became a science teacher, taught middle and high school science teacher for 5 years, and then went on to get my master's degree. And then so that's one truth. Another truth is I've been working on OSEP projects since 2008. My first project director role was with the University of Southern Maine in a 325T prep project. Was improving teaching through, or transforming teaching through collaborative teacher education. So it was taking general education, special education pathways, bringing them together, revising syllabi. And since then been working, actually was also working with Maine's Assistive Technology Act program and the Maine Department of Education on OSEP through the NIMAC at that time as well. So long history in OSEP, and it's just been such a privilege to work on these projects related to, I think, the dream, being able to kind of get back to that and really focusing on the work. Like many of you, it's been distracting. So my dream really is to be able to go back to thinking about performance measures and really digging into the work without having anything sort of hanging along the side, and really focusing back on the needs of our students with disabilities. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everybody has had no problems getting to the slide deck.
It looked in the chat like everyone worked. And actually, Cynthia, that is the first bit.ly link that has ever worked for me on my government computer. So whatever you did, keep doing it.
It's magic. Yes, I have whatever the insider magic is. I'm not sure. I actually have a paid subscription to Bitly, so that might be part of it. So as Jennifer introduced, I am the project director of the new National Center on Accessible Digital Educational Materials and Instruction. That's a long acronym, NCADEMI, but we gave ourselves a pass because NCADEMY, we made it a word. So we said, well, we can have a long acronym, we'll make an exception for this center. John has the first poll, if you would launch that, John. It's just a quick question before I start talking about the center to get a sense of, by chance, if there are folks here who are already familiar with NCADEMY. I know many of your names and familiar with with the work you're doing in your states, but I'm not sure whether you're familiar with NCADEMY. So the choices here, to what extent are you aware of NCADEMY and our resources? I've participated in a webinar or used an NCADEMY resource. And keeping in mind, we just launched October 1. I've explored NCADEMY's website. I've heard about NCADEMY, but I don't know much about it, or this is the first I've heard of NCADEMY. So those are your 4 choices. This is a single one option question. So please go ahead, select submit, and we'll take a look at the results. All right, exciting. Okay, so we've had, looks like most everyone, this is the first you've heard of NCADEMY. A handful have heard about it, but don't know much about it. And somebody's participated in a webinar and used an NCADEMY resource. So that's exciting. So whoever that is, please be active in the chat. Talk a little bit about, maybe what you've learned and recommendations that you might have for folks who are just getting started with the center. There is a recent introduction to NCADEMY webinar, and I wanted to share this because I know this is a very limited time, and the center is, as I'll share on a broad overview of it, is really quite broad and deep. So the January 21st webinar that we presented as an introduction to Academy is available as a recording, and there's also a Q&A summary available for that webinar recording. So as I mentioned, we are pronounced Academy. We are a new center. We launched October 1, funded by OSEP. The goal of Academy is to improve the quality, availability, and timely provision of accessible digital educational materials and instruction for learners with disabilities from preschool through high school graduation. So Academy provides technical assistance specifically related to individuals with disabilities under Part C and under Part B of IDEA. We're located at Utah State University, and we're administered there through the Institute for Disability Research, Policy and Practice, which is Utah's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And then more specifically, the team of Academy is primarily a merger between two centers at the IDRPP, WebAIM, which has over 25 years of international technical assistance and training on web accessibility, document accessibility, digital accessibility in general, and TACE, which is the Center for Technical Assistance for Excellence in Special Education. TACE has over 40 years of working with states on implementing IDEA policy. So it's really exciting to have these two centers come together. The digital accessibility expertise of WebAIM, special education and policy, and state implementation of best practices under IDEA, and bringing these centers together. And then we've also, as a result of having won this award, hired additional staff. So we're pretty diverse across policy as well as practice in both IDEA and digital accessibility. The two related laws that we're most focused on under supporting states and school districts on meeting accessibility legislation includes ADA Title II, and that is has become really important since the Department of Justice issued a final rule on ADA Title II back in April. And this has far-reaching implications for the technology and digital materials that state educational agencies and school districts and schools and individual teachers even select. The technologies and digital materials must be accessible from the beginning. There are specific standards that are now specified under ADA Title II, and that's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines at specific level 2.1 or version 2.1 and level AA. So the Department of Justice has been very clear in the final rule about what the requirements are on state and local governmental entities, including state and local educational agencies. So Academy is here to provide support around helping states and school districts meet the conformance timeline for ADA Title II for states and large school districts. That's in April of 2026. And for smaller school districts, that's April of 2027. So we have a particular focus of our TA is to help states and school districts meet those requirements and the conformance timelines. And then we also, in parallel with supporting, providing technical assistance to ensure digital accessibility from the beginning for everyone, in particular students with disabilities and parents with disabilities, and of course teachers with disabilities. We also provide TA under IDEA and making sure that when the system falls short of providing accessibility from the beginning, how do we ensure that students with disabilities who require accessibility because of a disability, they use assistive technology, how do we ensure that they receive those materials in an accessible format in a timely manner under their IEP? So the IDEA support that we provide really rooted in the 2004 reauthorization of IDEA and the implementation of the provisions of the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard and the supports provided by the National Instructional Materials Access Center. So our IDEA support related to NIMAS and the NIMAC. We have TA responsibilities that extend beyond state and local educational agencies. We're providing targeted TA to Part C lead agencies. So there we're looking at early intervention and thinking about how can we support service providers and families of infants and toddlers with disabilities as they're entering into that transition between Part C and Part B. So taking the individualized family service plan program and thinking about how can we make sure that infants and toddlers with disabilities who are going to require accessible materials, how can we prepare them for the types of materials, the technology, the interactives that are typically used in early childhood education programs. We're providing targeted TA to parent information centers to help them better prepare parents and caregivers to advocate for their children with disabilities who need accessible digital educational materials. We're providing targeted TA to pre and in-service teacher and administrator prep programs. So what do preparation programs need to better prepare? Speaking of the conversation that we were just having around the needs of teacher candidates and induction, all the way to veteran teachers who are in graduate programs, how can we make sure that considerations related to accessible materials are provided, particularly under both general education and special education pathways? And then for OSEP TA and D centers, as well as other OSEP centers like Stepping Up Technology grantees, we're providing TA to help improve the accessibility of the resources, the products and services that OSEP centers are developing and disseminating. So some of our sample resources and publications, just to give you a sense, and I know with today's agenda, a link to this particular page was provided, but like I said, we're brand new. We just started October 1, but we do have a sample of resources that we have that we prepared ahead of our launch on October 1 and that we've continued to develop. So we have a web page where families, teachers, administrators, if they have questions specific to their state context and state resources, we have a Find Your State Accessible Educational Materials contact page that covers all the states and jurisdictions. We have a roadmap for states and school districts to help meet the conformance timelines for ADA Title II. We have an accompaniment to the 2024 AT guidance that was issued by the Office of Educational Technology and OSEP related to providing assistive technology under IDEA. That guidance does not include accessible educational materials, which are also a requirement under IDEA. So Academy developed an accompaniment to the AT guidance that for each myth and fact that's presented in the AT guidance, we include an AIM tie-in. So how does the provision of accessible educational materials relate to each myth and fact so that IEP teams aren't overlooking students' needs for accessible formats. And then we have in partnership with the NIMAC, we developed a guide called NIMIS and NIMAC, what SEAs and LEAs need to know. So those are our early releases and some things for you to look forward to from Academy. We're having right now we have a placeholder website, but we are updating that. So it's our formal website. The website that we have is the website that we launched with on October 1, and we've been developing a more formal website. We'll have micro-credentials on specific accessibility topics. We're developing a searchable clearinghouse or product accessibility review platform that states and school districts can tap into in the process of vetting the accessibility of products that are under curriculum adoption. And we are updating the quality indicators for providing accessible digital educational materials and instruction. The current version of these quality indicators date back to 2020. So Academy is revising these. They'll be specific to states and school districts, and these indicators with critical components will help put together both the requirements and what indicators look like for being successful and effective with both meeting the ADA Title II requirements as well as requirements and obligations under IDEA. So this might be a good time, John, to launch the second poll. This one has to do with related to Academy's resources. What areas of technical assistance would be most helpful to your SEA? So what areas of technical assistance would be most helpful? Here are your options: procurement guidance for ensuring digital accessibility in requests for proposals and negotiations with EdTech vendors. or procurement guidance for ensuring NIMIS language is included in purchase orders and contracts with publishers. Training to support general education teachers on digital accessibility, such as creating and selecting accessible materials, websites, apps, or training to support special education teachers and IEP teams on the provision of accessible formats for eligible students. So those are the 4 choices. You could probably choose all 4, but we're going to limit it to 1 just to get a sense of, is there a theme, is there a pattern? And how that helps TA centers.
Cynthia, I'll give people just a few more moments to answer. We've got about 50% response rate so far. So I'll give people a couple more minutes before I share the results.
Okay.
Or a couple moments, not minutes. And I know I'm going to cut someone off from giving their answer, but I'm going to end the poll, and here we go.
Okay, so this is helpful. So with the really kind of a tie here between training to support general ed teachers on accessibility from the beginning and training for special ed teachers on how to consider needs through the IEP process. Very helpful. All right, so we're getting close. So that's kind of interesting. That's closer to sort of the practitioner level than the system level. So we need your input. We have a National Digital Accessibility Needs campaign happening at Incademy. We have surveys for all of our targeted TA areas. And we also have a virtual listening tour for states and school districts as well. So the link is incademy.org/input. There's also a QR code here if you happen to if you prefer to grab that on your phone or your tablet while you're here. They're really designed to take just 5 or 10 minutes, the surveys. And the virtual listening tour is made up of 3 listening sessions. One is actually today. I've got to hop over to that listening session now. We also have one on February 11th and February 19th. So the listening tours are specific to states and school districts. We'll also be having a series of focus groups related to associations and organizations that are key influencers within our other 4 targeted TA areas. So you can reach us at incademy@usu.edu. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We also have a newsletter, so that's incademy.org/newsletter. Will take you to the sign up form to get our notifications.
So Cynthia, if a state wants TA, they're ready to work with you all, is using the email address that you provide on the slide, is that the best way to reach you think?
Right now it is, yep, incademy@usu.edu.
Okay, great. Very good.
That is the best way.
We have time for questions. And I have to say, this is, apropos of nothing, but the conformance, the use of the word conformance, I don't think we ever use that in the ed, our different ed notices, etc. It was interesting to see that used so much. It just means to conform, right? Like you have to conform to this rule. I hadn't really seen that before, but it seems pretty heavily used with Title II. A little bit different. No questions?
I have a question.
Good.
Forgive my ignorance because I hopped on a little bit late. Hi, Cynthia. My question is this. Does this center function like a lot of other centers where you will have lots of resources and products that are free on the website, but that if an SEA needs specific help, there will be a charge and a cost for that? I'm just looking at the budgeting and the finance model.
Good question.
No, so for Incademy, all of our both of our universal TA, so I think that kind of gets to your point about everything on our website, our publications, recorded webinars, all of that is free, and our targeted technical assistance, which for Incademy will be cohorts of TA for states and school districts, that will be free as well.
Okay, awesome. Finally, something that's free.
Yeah, everything will have a scope though. There's no intensive TA with this center. So we won't be working directly with any individual state, like a lot of TA centers have an intensive TA tier. We have 2 tiers of TA under our OSEP funding, universal and targeted. So the targeted TA will be cohorts of states and school districts, everybody getting the same sort of TA treatment.
Okay, MTSS tier 1 and tier 2. Okay.
Right. It's a good way to look at it.
Other questions? Well, Cynthia, was lovely to have you on. Of course, you're welcome to stay
Thanks so
on
much.
with us because we're going to talk about good stuff. As we always
No,
do.
I'm sure. I got to hop over to that listening session, but thanks so much for the opportunity. And yeah, academy@usu.edu, and look forward to working with everyone.
Yeah,
Let us
that'll be
know how we
great.
can help you. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye. So just to bring us back to last month, all the way in January, we started our series on coaching. And this I talked about this at a bit more length last time, but this came about, from various things I'd heard from projects. And then also we had some evaluations or surveys that were saying, I'd like to hear more about this. And then there were some meeting notes from the SPDIG national meeting that said, okay, this is challenging and this is challenging about coaching. And it all came together to say, okay, we need a coaching series. And we are unique, the SPDIG grants generally, because coaching is required, right? It's part of what we do. Maybe it's called mentoring, maybe it's called something a little bit different, but the big idea is we don't do one-off trainings, right? We don't do workshops and then hope for the best. And the list of things that I've learned to say over time: sage on a stage, train and hope, spray and pray. What am I missing? Any other good ones? Nope, I got them all. Which one?
Sit and get.
Sit and get. That's right. How can I forget? That's the original, right? Makes my bottom hurt just thinking about it. So I think coaching is something that we talk about more than a lot of people, a lot of groups, but it's still something, that we're always figuring out. There's more and more research, but we still need to learn more about what works. And even though we're not research grants, this is program evaluation that you participate in, we still learn from that program evaluation, right? And so Rebecca last time started us off, getting us thinking about creating plans for coaching and the different elements of it. And we knew that we needed to get to that next step of thinking about measuring coaching, measuring fidelity of coaching, measuring impact of coaching, and many other things. And luckily I was wrong. I thought this month, the Rutgers coaching model demonstration team was going to come speak with us. It's actually next month. So we had a space. Rebecca was kind enough to say she'd come back. And so now we get to finish out those ideas. Like, okay, you put together a good coaching system. It's got all these features. You've thought through communication. You've thought through how it's going to support teams, et cetera. Now, how will you know, right? And so she's going to get into the details on coaching effectiveness, but she's going to start off by sharing her 2 truths and a dream.
All right. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me back. I am super excited to be here again. I would have to say, I'm going to be really honest. My first truth is that I had family in town over the weekend, a lot of family who stayed with me. And as much as I love them, when I dropped them off at the airport, I did have a little bit of a sigh of relief, as much as I love them. My second truth is that I'm very tired as a result. So I'm going to really try to bring the energy today. It is at the end of the day. I love this topic, but I am feeling a little tired with everything going on. I would have to say my dream, and I just was telling my husband this the other day, is I miss the moments where I walk into a school and you can just feel the learning and happiness vibe. And right now I'm dreaming to be able to do that soon. There's a lot of that external stuff going on, weighing superintendents and principals and teachers down. And I think you get that vibe when you go into school. So my dream is to be able to walk back into a school and just feel the excitement to learn again. All right. So here we go. You guys had me here last month. And when I looked at the evaluation surveys, this idea around coaching effectiveness really did bubble up. So we're just going to keep going where we left off and really focus on these learning objectives around reviewing where we were last time, especially for those of you who are unable to attend, and discuss the why behind collecting coaching data, potentially identify some sources that we can use to identify and measure the effectiveness, and then at the end, really connect all the pieces to our coaching puzzle.
Rebecca,
So-
I just realized I did not share the data I was supposed to. Did you want me to share the survey results about coaching or not? Are
Nope,
you okay with
that's, yep,
You okay?
we're okay. Nope,
Okay,
that-
good.
it was,
Just
it was
wanna
pretty resounding that everybody really wanted to talk more about this idea around data collection, I think was the biggest takeaway. All right, so we're going to start with a waterfall chat. And what I want you to do is just take a minute or two to type into the chat. Don't hit enter yet. Just type into the chat. What is something you've reflected on since our last time together regarding your work with coaching? If you were not with us last time, what is something you're thinking about when it comes to your coaching work within your SPDEG? I'm just going to give you a minute and then I'll count down. And when I say go, everybody hit enter and throw that right into the chat. So I'll give you a minute to reflect and type that, but don't hit enter yet. Oh, 30 more seconds. Okay, when you're ready, everybody hit enter and go. Oh, it's my favorite thing to do. Okay. Scaling coaching from the State Department all the way to the schools effectively. I love that. Building coaching systems, their capacity, using tools to blend formal PD with coaching activities, true coaching and training versus training. Oh, a written manual or guide to help the coaches. When is the best time to collect that coaching data? That's a really good question. Fidelity, delivery of a particular coaching model or structure. How do you measure that, right? Here's a good challenge, how to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? Especially with FTE challenges, need live in-person coaching, but you can only provide so much. And there's that online coaching that just lacks some of that personal connection. Practice-based coaching, self-assessment again at 10 a year, supporting folks to think outside the box when it comes to coaching in small systems. Veronica, I'm going to lift that up because that's kind of one of the things that were lifted up is you got to think about function over form. Remember? So when we think about what we did last time, we really talked about, implementation and sustainability. Part of a huge that is coaching. But when you think about the bigger system, right, it's going to look different in a big district versus a small rural district. So we have to think about a coaching system and make it context specific, really connecting this idea of how the coaches are consistently coaching, what does their communication look like, how clarity exists amongst the system. And then we talked a lot about those individualized service plans, right? If you have a coach or a number of coaches, what does their specific process look like? This kind of goes back to the idea around coaching model, right? Where does the coaching model fit in this? And thinking about what that process looks like within your coaching system, all the way down to the service plan. And a lot of the feedback that I received from you all last time, and we're actually meeting next week to start digging into that feedback, was around our coaching system template. I shared this last time. I will be happy to put this back into the chat. So if you weren't here last time or were not familiar, but we spent a little time digging into this template that you see here. And this is in test mode. It has not been usability testing yet. We are still working through the kinks, but one of the biggest pieces of feedback that you all shared with us was, this is great for a large district, right? Or it might work really well to indicate what it looks like from state to regional to district. However, it really was not usable for our small districts where the coach may also be the principal, or the coach may also be the curriculum director, or you have a literacy interventionist along with a coach, or the coach is the special ed person, right? Like a lot of times in our smaller districts, they wear multiple hats. And so we are meeting next week to start digging into this and reevaluating it and make some modifications as a result and another version. So just wanted to say thank you for that. And I will get the chat in there in just a second. Okay, as I see your request. All right, so today, like I said, we're going to be jumping into this idea around coaching effectiveness, but I want to make sure I also answer your questions because we didn't have a whole lot of time for question and answer last time I was here. So I want to collect them as we go this time. So you'll see a QR code on your screen for the Padlet. I will also put a link in the chat for you. Just feel free to add any questions as you think about reflecting on where you're at with coaching in your SPDIG. You'll see that I have here what questions you might have around coaching system, this idea around coaching service delivery plans, and then questions around coaching effectiveness data. Okay, so those are kind of the three big buckets. You can just add as a comment. If you really love somebody's question, let me know, just heart it. And so that I can make sure that I get it answered. And if I don't get it answered, I can do a Q&A document afterwards and for John and Jennifer to send out to the group. Okay. So feel free to fill that out as we go along. All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of why we're here today. And that's getting into this idea of you have this beautiful coaching system. You've got each coach has a service plan. We know what we're supposed to be doing, but how do we know if it's working? At SysUp, we use a specific tool. Some of you will be familiar with it. It's the district capacity assessment. And I pulled the specific item number 27 out of that capacity assessment to kind of show you where SysUp is coming from when we think about building capacity in our coaching work. And that is, at a minimum, coaching effectiveness data is assessed at least 3 times a year. That's kind of standard that we have in our assessment tool. But I would argue that you look at your data as it comes in, right? You shouldn't meet unless you have data to look at, is what my friend Ellen Nasik always tells me. So when you think about when there was a question regarding when do you look at coaching effectiveness data? It's always really good to look at it minimum 3 times a year, but you should really be looking at it as it's coming in, right? And I'll have some examples of kind of what SysUp does with our coaching data. You need to use at least 3 sources of data. And you'll see a generalized list here from survey data to observations, to product reviews, to coaching logs. These are just general examples, okay? I'll show you kind of, what we use and some more detailed ideas around the types of measurements you should be thinking about. And then you'll see that last item, coaching effectiveness data are utilized to inform improvement, recruitment, selection, training, and other implementation items, right? And when we think about work as coaches or providing coaching, the whole point of collecting the data isn't about evaluating that coach. It's not about evaluating the person's work. It's about evaluating the system. It's about evaluating the service plans. It's about identifying those improvements that the coach may need some support, some additional training, some ideas, but it's really about that improvement process. When we think about coaching effectiveness data, okay, it's about collectively looking at that coaching service plan and that system together. So when we were thinking about last time, big picture to little picture, right? And in aggregated form, we wanted to make those improvements to the system, modify those service plans, identify and monitor potential implementation barriers that may exist, right? And it's really critical to think about how you can use this data to promote the importance of coaching. Last time I was here, I provided a video to watch on your own time because we didn't get a chance to watch it on Freeland Community School Districts that is spending some time building out their system, building out their service plans and collecting data. Their coaches were on the verge of potentially being cut due to budget restrictions, right? Common story across the country. Positions like coaches often are the first to go when we start to have to tighten our belts a little bit. And so when you're thinking about it, it's really hard to justify coaching positions to your board if you don't have data to back up the impact that they're having, or to back up the work that they're having, or who they're seeing, or why they're seeing. So this data is not only important to improving the coaching system, the coaching service plan, and to really improve implementation, but it's really also important to help think through how you can justify and show return on investment for these coaches. So let's go back to that Padlet. I'm going to add a question for you because I want you to do some reflection. I'm going to go ahead and add it right now. What measurements are you using? And do some reflection and think through. I'm going to go ahead and pin that. There we go. Think through what measurements you have built into your SPDIG so far for coaching. Okay. Are your coaches collecting data through coaching logs? Are you using teacher surveys? Direct observation of the coach? Do you have coaching self-reflection documentation, fidelity data, cycle documentation? I'm just kind of curious and wondering. So if you could jump into that Padlet and start to fill this bucket out for me. And I'll give everybody about 3 or 4 minutes to fill that out. Also feel free to add any additional questions you might have. So I'm just going to give you a minute. What measurements are you using for coaching that you can think of off the top of your head based off my descriptions? Coaching logs, teacher surveys, direct observation, coaching observation checklist, coaching logs, visualizations through Power BI. Courtney, I'm very familiar with DPI's Power BI and I love it. Satisfaction surveys, conversation documentation, fidelity of implementation targeted EPB. That's very important. Okay. Fidelity checklist, online coaching platform, video reviews. I want to know more about that. We've been having a lot of conversation around online coaching platforms such as video reviews. There's a lot of things bubbling up in the world of AI that are kind of interesting, such as teachers being able to record themselves and dropping it into an AI to have a summary and a self-evaluation done, which is kind of interesting. Well, thank you. You guys are doing really good work, right? We're collecting all of this data. So let's get into levels of data. So if you remember previously when I mentioned that you should look at 3 different types of data, we kind of break this up into 3 big buckets when we're thinking about how do we collect that data? What do we want to make sure that we have? When we think of the different levels of data, we have big data, which you can see here is really about that big picture illuminated group trends. It can be really quick to collect, such as a survey, right? Your districts that you're supporting, your regional agencies that are involved, it's really easy to collect that data because it's typically done in the form of a survey. Then you have a little bit what we refer to as little data, right? And that is data that can really identify coaching trends or instructional skill gaps that can help identify where the coaches need to focus more, both for themselves and their skill set, as well as the teachers that they're supporting. It can be a little bit more time consuming to collect, but it allows you to really start to move from the big trends to those very specific gaps that may exist. And then finally, microdata. The microdata allows you to dig in deep into the experiences and gain insights from the coaches and the staff to really monitor and internalize what's going on. These data points can be time consuming to collect and process, but they allow you to identify, what's really truly needed to fix potential barriers. So let's look at some examples. When we think about group trend, you're going to see those surveys like I mentioned, right? Teacher satisfaction survey, coaching surveys that are out there. For the little data, it's the idea around your fidelity data, because while it's giving you group trends, you're very specifically focused on that practice that you're implementing, how the teachers are doing, where the targeted supports are needed. Coaching logs are another example. And then microdata, right? It's that really in the weeds data that we want to look at, that we can look at regularly. And that's coach self-reflection documentation, coaching cycle documentation, focus groups, or interviews of those receiving supports. Okay. So at CSEP, when we take a look at our coaching system and what we provide, and I'm sorry, my images are a little off there. When we think about our big data or satellite data, what we're looking at is state liaison satisfaction surveys. So our state partners, we will send a survey out to them, ask them to complete it about once a year. And we also have a coaching survey that goes out about once a year as well, right? So it's that big data gives us some trends, gives us kind of a snapshot, a moment in time. For our map data or our little data, we take a look at our state identified evidence-based practice fidelity data. So whatever they are implementing, wherever they're showing that growth within the measurements, we take a look at that to help guide where we need to start to target potential supports. We also fill out, which we do once, actually we're supposed to do a little bit more, but we look at the fidelity data probably every 6 months, depending on the cycle in which they're collecting it, right? So it's very context specific. Our coaching logs, however, each team member on the CSEP team that's assigned a state for intensive support, we fill out coaching logs after every single contact, right? And then we look at it monthly. The data is compiled into a Qualtrics form, and we identify the barriers within it. And we meet monthly and we go through that data to identify what's going well, where can we replicate successes, what challenges are there in the system. One example of an area that we found we needed to improve upon was this idea around an identifiable state capacity development plan that was more usable and that we could track together as a team. Finally, microdata or street data. We are taking a deep dive into our coaching logs personally, beyond the monthly data cycle. We also have what we call a reflection cycle. So we often do SWOT analyses to dig deep and do some personal reflection on what's going well and where we may be struggling as a coach. And that kind of lends itself into this idea around barrier identification process with a team. We are paired up. And so we we do not go into states on our own coaching. So we do have that partner to help, process us through some of the challenges we may be experiencing and how we can improve our coaching moves and our strategies within the states that we develop. So that's just one example of the approach that CSEP takes to coaching effectiveness data. But that was from the coaching lens. All of this data is also collected for our evaluator. Our evaluator uses this data regularly to build out our reports, to measure our impact and our effectiveness and our reach through the states. And our evaluator is actually part of our monthly conversations at our team meeting. So that way she can correlate what she's pulling out of the data to our conversations around the coaching experience. So you've heard enough from me. Let's do a quick activity. If you're not familiar how to do annotation, I would really like you to go back to that Padlet and think about where your data falls in the description that I just provided. Do you hit big data, little data, micro data? Do you hit, are you mainly, in the big data, which is a lot of times where we fall because it's quicker and easier to collect. So I'm just curious, if you don't know how to annotate, the bar at the bottom, there's a pencil. You might also have a green pencil in the lower left-hand corner. John, I know we played around with this just to make sure everybody knew how to do it. If you need help with annotation because you've never done it before, just let us know. But it should be in your black Zoom bar and you can hit your pencil. And if you want, just give it a stamp and tell us, and go ahead and click right on the screen for me and let me know, where does most of your data fall around coaching effectiveness?
And
And
if anyone's having trouble finding the annotation, for me, where it says Rebecca Hornak screen at the top, there are 3 little dots in that bar. You choose the 3 dots and then you go to the third one where it says annotate, choose that. And then you'll have a bar come up, like a toolbar to the left. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
I couldn't remember. I know we had played around with the directions.
Because what the presenter sees is different than everyone else.
Yep. Give everybody a minute to kind of think and reflect. Falling a little bit heavy on the big data, a little bit lighter on the micro data. That has a tendency to trend whenever we do this activity. But I am seeing a number of users in the little data spot, which is good to see. Typically, like I said, we're usually pretty heavy on that bigger satellite data when we think about coaching effectiveness. Minute here. Okay. Well, thank you for participating. I greatly appreciate it. One sec here. I have to get out my own annotation. There we go. All right. So now thought we'd take time to jump into your Padlet to see what questions you might have around coaching. Looks like I only have one question, which is good. Hopefully my presentation was pretty clear and concise in what you were looking for. But Aaron's asking, to create lasting change, is it better to coach more teachers, but less often, or fewer teachers, but more frequently? Oh, that is a really good question, Aaron. At the CSEP Center, we focus on small scale first. And so, you know, when we think about implementation, I would always recommend to start small before you scale out or up, because we want to make sure that the teachers are doing well, that the coaches are doing well, because a lot of times, let's be transparent, a lot of times the coaches are learning just 1 or 2 steps ahead of the teachers for something new that's being implemented in some cases, right? And so I would recommend fewer more often before you started to scale up and out. That's just my natural tendency. Jennifer, what are your thoughts on that question?
I'm gonna agree that that is very hard.
Right? Is that a good question?
Yeah, no, with this SPDIG, we historically, when I first came into this SPDIG program, and then when I first started leading it, our program measures, also known as GEPRA measures,
Yep.
were, one of them was how many people attended your trainings this year, right? And so
Yep.
it was a real, to go back to our earlier sit and get, it was a real bottoms in seats kind of question, right? And so we spent years getting that idea across with the program measures and with everything else we do, that you want to go deep with the SPDIG. So I'm in agreement with you, Rebecca, in terms of, you know, you want to do something really well, and you're going to learn from doing something really well and be able to spread it
Right.
better.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got another question here. Who facilitates the interviews or focus groups of those being coached? From SysUp's perspective, I think that, you know, we have an evaluator and a team that will go in and run a focus group with our state transformation specialist or our liaisons to get that information. I think from a state perspective, thinking about regional and district and trying to zoom in on where that's at, I think it depends on the structure. I've been a curriculum director at a large district before, and I would run focus group with teachers to gain some insights on how they thought the implementation was going. And I would build in the coaching effectiveness questions there. I've done the same at a regional agency where we brought up principals and teachers, and we were talking about something specific we were implementing regionally, and gain some insight from them around the services they were gathering. So I think it depends on what level of the system you're in and who's getting coached versus who's doing the coaching and what information you want to glean. But that's a really good question to the studious Piranha that posted that. So thank you. Do you evaluate coaches' competency before they start coaching? I would say yes to that. That goes back to your selection process for hiring coaches. And, you know, whenever we go into a position, you don't know what you don't know. And there's still going to be some skills and some competencies that you're going to need to learn. I think it's really critical to measure their understanding, their skill sets as part of the selection process, and then coaches need coaches. And so making sure that they receive supports to fill up any gaps of knowledge that might occur before they start coaching others. All right, these are really good questions. Okay. All right. Well, keep adding your questions. I will revert back to it and take a look at it moving forward. But just to do a quick rewind, we've spent some time talking about the big picture, creating that consistency with all the coaches, and getting down to that nitty gritty of what are they coaching, how are they coaching, how often, and then defining those specific measurements to evaluate both the coaching plans and the coaching system. Okay. We're going to give you time in your small group, in some small groups, about 10 minutes to discuss the reflection prompts that you see here. I will go ahead and I'm going to put them in the chat for us while John gets breakout groups set up. It looks like There's 40 participants. John, you just want to do groups of 4 or 5? Will that work?
Yep, I've got that ready to go in the background. That'll be about 9 breakout rooms.
Oh, perfect. And let me do a quick copy and get these in the chat. There's the questions in the chat for you. We're going to give you about 10 minutes. And then when we come back, we'll have a quick whole group conversation.
Great. We'll come back at 20 past the hour.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic conversation. We're gonna jump into, just because we have such a, we're kind of wrapping up here. I have one final question, and this is open for the group. And in thinking about you've spent almost 3 hours with me now total, talking about coaching and how we measure it. So feel free to unmic or add it in the chat. Looking back at all your work and the conversation you just had and things that you've been reflecting on, what's one piece of advice you give yourself if you could go back in time with the knowledge you have now? You can unmute, you can put it in the chat.
And this is just about coaching, right? It's not like dating
Yep.
advice or anything like that.
Yep, this is
Okay.
kind of pulling all the pieces together.
This is Becky, and I'm from the Minnesota Department of Education as the State Personnel Development Grant Coordinator. And when I've done coaching, what has been really helpful is finding themes that are similar across the board. And then bringing those themes together. And so, taking your qualitative data that you're getting from the coaching, but saying this really relates to learning targets. And then sometimes it's even taking the exact quote or as close as possible to that person's voice and putting it underneath that theme. So you have your theme, but then you also have their voice emerging, and then sharing that with all of the schools, or if it's in your building, a larger group, and having them unpack it.
Thank you, Becky, because that was one of the things that I didn't clearly articulate, was this idea of how do you put all the puzzle pieces together with your data and how do you use them in a structured way? I think that was a fantastic example. So thank you for sharing.
I have a comment, Rebecca.
Yeah.
This is Stacy from New York. So looking back, so I'm like putting the clock back. If I had to do this all over again, I think it would be having a clear understanding of coaching model, right? Like,
Yep.
and then being able to provide opportunities for training for my team so that we were on the same place, and then being able to have an assessment that was aligned truly with that model. I don't know if Jennifer remember this, like when I first came in and I started reading about coaching, I'm like, oh, it's like consultation. And then at some point, the coaching literature folks might have been like, oh my God, Stace, it's just coaching. Let's not talk about consultation, right? Because in my head, that's where I was coming from. So for me, going back, that's what I would prefer.
Yeah, it's helpful to define exactly what that model looks like for a team up front in your system, so everybody knows. It doesn't necessarily get into the moves or the strategies, but it provides them that process, right? I think that's a really good example. We have a couple of comments in the chat. Anybody else wants to unmute, feel free to. Don't assume people can do basic coaching behaviors and explicitly teach them the behaviors you want to see. This is equally, if not more important than the content. I would agree with you. When we think about selection process and hiring people, what does that process look like so you can gauge that explicit skill set of coaching, right? Their ability to take feedback, their ability to provide feedback, the ability to build relationships and reciprocate conversation, and their observation skills. There's just so much that goes into that. Let's see, encourage coaches to do everything they expect their schools to do first. Absolutely. great comment. Those are some really good examples around DCA and module review as well, Jenny. Okay. So feel free to follow SysApp. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can jump in and we try to post resources regularly. And then I'm going to put in the chat the coaching template. Oops, sorry. I will go ahead and put the coaching template back into the chat so you have easy access. If you're not familiar with the AI Hub, I have just a minute here. I'm going to show you an improvement we recently did that might help your coaching journey. Let me do a quick share. So if you're looking for resources at our Active Implementation Hub, we now have a chat bot that can help you. So if you're looking for, do I create a coaching system? Give it a sec. It will formulate and provide you direct links. A lot of people have said that our main hub has a lot of resources and you can get buried in the weeds. So we added AI Squared chatbot to help you with all of your implementation needs. So you can always head on over to the Implementation Hub to get what you need for coaching. You can also reach out to me directly at that email address. And I think with that, I'm all set unless there are any other questions or statements or suggestions or concerns.
Just to the chat bot, we tried it out the other day in a meeting in OSAP. It worked really well. And so my understanding, Rebecca, is this is just internal to the AI Hub, right? It doesn't like go out into Google and find answers. It's just the AI Hub. So that's a really nice thing that you're not getting random advice from who knows. And it did a great job. Everything we asked it did a really nice job responding back. It was super helpful. Yeah.
I'll give that feedback back to the team. All right. Anything else for the good of the order from Jennifer or John before we sign off?
Well, it's got something to say. So this is fantastic. And, you know, if there are still questions coming up for folks that you feel like you want to get more in depth, please do pass those on. You can send them to John or to myself. You can give them to your project officer to pass up the chain, however you want to do it. But you get to guide this coaching series, right? I've got some presenters coming to talk, but they can typically talk about anything with coaching. And so please let us know what you need more of, and we'll do it. If there's a resource that you really need for your coaching system, please let us know, because probably someone has created it who we have access to. It probably lives, exists, breathes somewhere. I think that's about it from my side. John, anything for you?
No, I think that's it. I just want to be sure to thank Rebecca and Cynthia Curry for taking time to come and share today. And of course, everybody who's been with us for the full session. Thank you all.
Yeah, Rebecca, that was fantastic. Not surprisingly, thank you for being with us twice. We really got to kind of finish out that line of thinking, and I think you brought up some important concepts that are definitely next level from what you usually hear about the topic of coaching. So thanks for doing that with us, and I hope you get a chance to rest now. Okay, everyone have a good afternoon.